We are here with Jon Duffy from ConsumerNZ. Welcome, John. It's a pleasure to have you today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So we had Carolyn Young on last week, and she was hoping to talk with you guys about some stuff that she'd like to implement um in the future with around the retail and all that. So, have you had those conversations with her yet, or are you on the planning stages? If so, how are they going?
Look, we haven't had those conversations yet, so I'm not sure what aspect of retail she was talking about. The last time we had a conversation, it was more around security in retail premises, and probably the most contentious issue was facial recognition technology being used in supermarkets.
Yeah, and it was around like the crime and the citizens arrest and all that kind of stuff that she was talking about, and how she can work with you in terms of improving um pay wage. Because one thing I brought up at the end of the interview was that a lot of businesses sadly don't offer pay way for us disabled folk in the community, and I fortunately I do not have that problem. I just want to preface that now for people that need reminding. But there are some people in the community that I deal with that don't have a family member that goes out with them, and they rely on payway, whether that be on their card or their phone, with the new phone cards. So how are you going to combat that and encourage more businesses that don't currently offer payway to offer that?
Well, I think the first and biggest issue is the whole concept of surcharging in New Zealand. So, um, whether a retailer is offering PayWave or not, typically if they are, there is some sort of surcharge attached to that, and it varies greatly from retailer to retailer. Right? You might have a corner dairy charging 3.5% surcharge. You go to the supermarket, you can use PayWave, and it's free, which is one potentially the only good thing that supermarkets are doing for New Zealand at the moment. I'm being facetious there, but also not. Um, the the idea that we have this absolutely chaotic system where you don't know what you'll be paying depending on the payment method that you're choosing is it is bananas in my view. If you travel overseas, um, you don't have to think about what method of payment that you're using when you go into a store, and as a result, the proliferation of PayWave is much higher because merchants know that the costs to provide that service to their customers is just another cost of doing business. It's not like when you buy hot cross buns, you get a surcharge for how much the business you're buying it off is paying in electricity or for water or any other cost of doing business. Why are we doing that for banking services? So that's a very, very long way of saying the starting point is to actually level the playing field so that um, merchants can access all payment types at a reasonable cost and absorb those into what they're charging consumers.
Because my concern is, and that it will become another discriminatory avenue for disabled people. As a advocate, I worry very much that payway not being available in some cases, or even cash options will become very discriminatory for our community, because we can't go and punch a card number in like your normal everyday person in some cases, unless you've got a unless you've got a caregiver. But no, not everyone has that in this current climate. But that's another story for another day. Um,
Well, no, look, I hear that, and it's an issue that I've personally, along with other advocates, raised with the New Zealand Bankers Association in relation to modern terminals that don't have raised surfaces, right? So you'll be well aware of these that they're like an iPhone. And look, I'm I have relatively good eyesight and I often miss the appropriate button. So if I had low vision, I would really be struggling. We've heard stories of people with low vision being confronted with these terminals um, and having to provide their PIN to a shop assistant in order to be able to pay for goods. This situation is bananas. And in to their credit, the Bankers Association and the CEs of the banks who are present agreed that that's not a tolerable situation. But again, like many things in the surcharging realm, a lot of the blame gets pushed away from the banks and onto terminal providers or the card schemes like Visa and MasterCard, that sort of thing. It's the Commerce Commission, I think, needs to do a better job in this space of actually explaining what's going on behind the scenes and applying pressure to increase the quality of customer service that merchants are able to offer their customers.
Final question on this section before I hand over to Paul. Um, do you think there will come a time where, as a Commerce Commission, you will have to either force merchants and work with the government, whether that be Minister Willis in her grocery capacity or Minister Scott Simpson, to force merchants to, have a cash option or a pay wave option, especially for the disabled community?
In an ideal competitive landscape, the clear demand for contactless payment would be driving the offering. So if businesses had to respond to competitive pressures as you would expect them to, most businesses would be signing up and offering contactless payments um, to cater to all of the needs of their consumers. We've got unfortunately a system that is a real mess at the moment. So there's so much confusion out there around what merchants will be paying, what they should be paying, what they can pass on to customers, that you'll see some merchants just throw up their hands and say, well, we're just not going to offer PayWave because it's too expensive to do. Um, if the if the card schemes and the terminal providers were responding properly to the needs of their customers, which are the merchants, you wouldn't see that happening. So more regulation needs to be done. That falls at the feet of the Commerce Commission. And if the Commerce Commission aren't capable of doing that, then yes, we may need to see. I think Minister Simpson would be the one responsible there, stepping in to do more.
Thanks. I'll hand over to Paul now.
I'm going to change tack ever so slightly. And as much as I do want to talk to you about the hot cross buns testing that you guys have been doing lately, which surprised me, I was very surprised to see New World came out on top with that particular test. I'm actually really curious about the supermarket duopoly, which has obviously been big news, and we've seen a lot of noise about that for years now over successive governments. Last week, I think it was, Nicola Willis got up and says, we're going to do something about it. We're going to ask for more information. How much more information do you think they actually need to be able to come up with a plan to help introduce a third viable marketplace player in this?
I think the interesting thing about what the minister announced last week is she's only talking to potential entrants. So she's not going out and saying, "Hey, supermarkets, tell me what you think uh, we need to do to get a competitor to come and compete against you." We've done that. She's not even coming out to interest groups like ours to say, "What do you think needs to happen?" Because it's all theoretical. What she's saying is, right, I will go to the people who potentially could actually do this and ask them what they would need moved out of the way to enter the market. And I think that is an approach that hasn't been tried. The Commerce Commission did a market study, and yes, would have spoken to hypothetical new entrants. We are a lot closer to entry being possible when you've got a minister in charge of this, who's also a cabinet minister and the Minister of Finance, expressing a willingness to make structural changes to the industry to enable entry and approaching new entrants directly. That's quite a big step forward from a Crown entity doing a market study or government implementing a a code of conduct or a wholesale regulatory regime. So this does feel like progress. Having said that, Time will tell, and it's all very well and good for the finance minister to say that she's willing to do certain things. She needs to get that through cabinet, which is a coalition arrangement, and we've already had noises from other coalition partners, the ACT Party in particular, suggesting that they would not be in favour of any drastic structural moves, which, in my personal opinion, are the only way forward. I don't really see any other way round getting a new entrant into the market without some structural change at a retail and at a wholesale level.
We've seen people try and come in. We've seen groups come in and try to become that third player in the market. What have been the stumbling blocks that they've come across that have stopped them from succeeding?
Well, most famously, the warehouse tried to expand. It faced hostile takeover action from the duopoly. Both parties started looking to acquire them. Um, they faced barriers around access to land. They faced, the covenants that have been widely reported that supermarkets have been able to lodge in places like shopping malls and things like that to prevent new entrants coming in. All the barriers that have been, um, covered over the last 3 years as this has been a hot topic. Access to wholesale. If you're as big as the warehouses and you can't get cheese or eggs or bacon suppliers to sell to you at the same amount as your major competitors, which are the supermarkets, that's a real problem, right? How do you ever expect to compete against them if they've got it sewn up? Or will take retaliatory action against those suppliers if they were to, um, breach the unwritten contract and sell to you at a competitive price.
Is there a bit of an insular attitude towards bringing in something from the outside or changing the way that we do things in relation to what end consumers end up with? And I'm thinking of the duopoly, but I'm also thinking in particular of gentailers for electricity. We have a very limited market in that respect. And there's constantly talk about power price increases people have to deal with all the time because the gentailers are doing things. Is that a Kiwi attitude of we know what we've got and we don't want to change things, or is that more of an industry led? This is what you're getting, so suck it up and deal with it.
Yeah, that's quite a tricky question to answer. It's a good one. I think the two markets are different. They have nuances that mean that the competition issues are quite different in the sense that in the supermarket sector, the competition issues are driven by a lack of competitors. So there's only two competitors really. So new entry there would be a fundamental change. And I don't sense from my chats with consumers or the research that we've done that people would be against. Aldi is often cited as an external foreign entrant that could come into the market and be ready to go. I don't think it's that easy at all. They'd have to buy land, they'd have to build out distribution. There's a huge amount to be done to enter the market. But I don't sense that anybody is saying, "Oh, we wouldn't want them to come in because they're a German brand or they're headquartered offshore." I mean, half the duopoly is already owned by Australia. That being Woolworths. Um, in energy, there's a national security kind of element to this. Like security of electricity supply is fundamental, and it often trumps all other considerations when you're talking about um, any changes that you might want to make to the market settings in electricity. The gentailers can always just fall back on, "Oh no, don't change that because there'll be blackouts and people won't be able to heat their homes." And governments, quite rightly, listen to that and go, "Well, we do not want people freezing through the winter." Unfortunately, the reality is people are freezing through the winter because the current market settings have set the prices too high and people can't afford. So they're voluntarily opting out rather than having their power switched off because there's not enough generation. Um, but again, to answer your question, I don't get a sense that there's any objection to, I don't know, a foreign company coming in and building an offshore wind plant, that wind farm that powers hundreds of thousands of houses, I think we'd happily take that extra capacity in our system.
Cool. And then final question from me, which again, completely different topic. Apps. The way that we use apps, they've obviously changed over the last decade or so. We see a whole bunch of big players like Uber, Airbnb, stuff like that hitting our market. I know one of the promises that the government went into the election with was to start taxing them at a much fairer rate than they were dealing with before. And that was something that the government sort of walked back. But I'm kind of curious from your perspective, working with consumers and looking out for consumers, what are some of the big changes that the growth of app-based economics has brought to the country, and some of the sort of challenges that people might not realize are actually out there that you're coming across within the organization?
That is an enormous topic. That's a whole nother podcast.
Okay.
But if I maybe focus on one aspect, just in the amount of time that we've got left, I think the emergence of what are called dark patterns is something we're really worried about, and that may be new terminology to some people tuning in on this. It might not be, but a quick explanation is a dark pattern is something that is introduced in the design of an app or a website, some sort of user interface that leads the consumer to make a decision that is suboptimal for them, but is the most optimal outcome for the website provider. And the easiest, clearest, simplest example to help people get their head around this idea is subscription services. So if you think of how easy it is to upgrade a subscription or to subscribe to a subscription service, a provider of something, let's say, I don't know, subscribing to a website to get behind their paywall, something like that, and then how difficult it can be to unsubscribe. So when you're making a decision that is beneficial to the business, that user flow is sweet. It is quick, easy. You throw your credit cards in there and off you go. To unsubscribe, I've seen extreme examples where you're bounced out of a digital environment and you're asked to ring a call center or write a letter to the organization to unsubscribe from a digital service. I mean, that is bananas. Those are extreme examples, but it can be more subtle than that. And there was a huge proliferation of dark patterns around the time that the GDPR, which is the privacy law in the EU, came out. And people might remember you started getting inundated with requests to accept or decline cookies, or update your privacy settings to accept or decline cookies. And the Norwegian Consumer Institute did a really interesting study around that time where they compared Facebook, Google, and I think Microsoft to look at the user flows through those privacy policies to see how consumers are actually guided through those flows and what the end results were. And what it showed was that Google and Facebook were pushing you in directions that was not good in terms of you holding back your personal information. But Microsoft's was very rudimentary, and they obviously hadn't twigged to the idea of a dark pattern. So it was pro privacy in the sense that it was so rudimentary. It just did what it got you through and didn't try and manipulate your choices.
Man. And of course, GDPR has been around a decade or so now, and cookies are a really interesting tracking tool these days, because there are some people who are very much, we need this to be able to work out patterns and see what our consumers are doing, and there are others going, well, this is obviously a breach of privacy because people don't understand exactly how much information cookies track and how much data they collect. Oh man, I don't envy you in that job at all.
Well, I mean, the cookie thing is really interesting in the sense that with the GDPR was designed to deal with that problem that you just described, but given the volume of notices that you get, every single website you go to, it's produced apathy, and people just click OK, from what I can observe anyway. And so it's actually had the opposite effect of what it was intended to do. So I'm sure regulation experts would be jumping all over that, going, well, what are the unintended consequences of an outright ban like that?
Interesting times. Anyway, Blake, I'll leave it back to you.
Just quickly before we let you go, is there any messages you want the public to know that you would like to get feedback on from them right now, or anything like that?
At the moment, we're working hard in the supermarket space, and anyone who's had issues with misleading promotional pricing or downright incorrect pricing at the supermarket, feel free to get in touch and let us know. If you can send through pictures of the product and the price, that's amazing. Examples of shrinkflation are really useful for us. So that's where price stays the same, but product gets smaller and you're not told about it. And people get it home and finish their bag of chips quicker than they usually do, and realize that the thing's shrunk by 50 grams. Any examples of really egregious surcharging that people see out there on EFTPOS terminals? We're really interested in building an evidence base to put to the Commerce Commission to make them understand that there is chaos out there in the community and it needs to be fixed. So those are a couple of areas that people could help us out. We really rely on information from the public to do good things for the public. So yeah, if anyone wants to get in touch with us, all our details are on consumer.org.nz.
And how do people become testers, like for the next round of Easter stuff or Christmas or any other kind of delicious treats that need to be tested?
We tend to put so people can go to the website and sign up to be a supporter, so that you don't have to pay us any money or anything like that, but you'll get information from us. And if we're running testing where we're bringing in people from the public, we'll put a notice out in our kind of weekly Saturday newsletter that goes out, and so people can get in touch with us that way.
Brilliant. I'm going to be signing up straight after this.
Yeah, it's not always fun. It's not always fun stuff. My wife's just finished doing fake tan testing, so that's not yummy like a hot cross bun. I did a testing for like a probiotics, not like your microbiome. So I had to poo in a jar and send it off to Australia to see what the test was like. So it's not always glamorous.
Okay, I will take it on board. But hot cross buns, it's really tempting, very tempting.
Anyway, on that note, thank you for joining us, John. It was a pleasure to speak with you today. Please stay with us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Tim.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And hopefully I can find a way out of this building.